what a woman is fit for in the world. And so when we came to reimagining the actual role of Snow White, it became about the fairest of them all, meaning who is the most just and who can become a fantastic leader. And the reality is, Snow White has to learn a lot of lessons about coming into her own power before she can come into power over a kingdom.
Hollywood's youngest queen just fired a shot, and everyone's watching it echo. Millie Bobby Brown, fresh off her latest press run and known for keeping it classy even when the industry isn't, has allegedly spoken out about the Snow White disaster, and she didn't hold back. What started as a quiet remark in a roundtable interview has now become a full-blown internet storm. Insiders claim Millie called out Rachel Zegler by name, criticizing how she handled the Snow White backlash and suggesting that her attitude toward fans was one of the reasons the film got quietly shelved. No big announcement, no red-letter cancellation tweet, just silence from Disney. And then this comment from Millie. That's when people started putting the pieces together. And here's the kicker. People listened. Why? Because when Millie Bobby Brown speaks, especially about accountability, industry culture, or public image, people stop scrolling. She's lived through the spotlight, dodged media traps, and learned early how quickly a narrative can turn against you. So when she allegedly said, "When you lead a project, you're also responsible for how you represent it and your audience," it wasn't just shade, it was a message. And Zegler? She's reportedly not handling it well. Sources say she didn't expect the criticism to come from another young actress, especially one with more years in the spotlight and a cleaner track record. Now the question is, did Millie just say what everyone else in Hollywood was thinking? Because if so, Zegler might be facing her biggest fallout yet. Not from trolls, not from fans, but from her own industry. You didn't expect the moment to blow up like this. It was just a quick interview, part of a standard Hollywood press cycle. But the way Millie Bobby Brown answered the question, it didn't feel standard, it felt surgical. When the topic of Snow White came up, Millie didn't roll her eyes. She didn't laugh. She didn't even raise her voice. She just paused, then delivered a quiet but clear message. When you lead a project, you're also responsible for how you represent it, and your audience. No names were mentioned, but everyone knew who she was talking about. Within hours, the clip went viral. TikTok editors slapped it over dramatic music. X lit up with quote tweets calling it the classiest call-out of the year. Fans started pairing Millie's calm demeanor with clips of Rachel Zegler's past interviews, ones where she dismissed Snow White's legacy, shaded the original story, and confidently claimed audiences would watch anything she did. Now, those old moments didn't look bold, they looked arrogant. Rachel had already been facing criticism from fans for months, but this was different. This wasn't some faceless account on social media. This was Millie Bobby Brown, a respected peer, someone younger but more seasoned, someone who'd carried franchises, dodged scandal, and grown up under the microscope. Insiders say Zegler was blindsided. She didn't expect that kind of public pressure from someone inside her own generation, let alone someone with more industry clout. And the worst part? Millie didn't come off petty, she came off measured, like a big sister who had seen the fallout coming long before anyone else and finally decided to say something. Now the story wasn't just Snow White is flopping, it was maybe Rachel Zegler was the reason why. It didn't happen the way most movie cancellations do. There was no press release, no Variety exclusive, no corporate apology. Disney didn't even try to spin it. Instead, they just disappeared the movie. First, the release date was pulled from the slate. Then the marketing budget dried up. Promotional tweets vanished. Mentions of Snow White slowly faded from official channels like a vanishing act nobody wanted to admit was real. The fans noticed immediately. No new trailers, no updated poster designs, radio silence. It wasn't just a delay, it was a quiet death. And in the vacuum of information, Millie Bobby Brown's calm but cutting remark landed like a finishing move. The media connected the dots. Influencers started using her clip as a timestamp. This is when Disney gave up. Meanwhile, Rachel Zegler was left carrying the weight, alone. After months of controversy, this should have been the final chance for a redemption arc. Instead, it turned into a collapse. Insiders say Rachel took the cancellation by silence hard. There were no big meetings, no crisis PR strategy, just nothing. No calls from Disney, no explanations, just the message every actor dreads. We're done here. And Millie's words, they echoed louder now. When you lead a project, that line took on a whole new meaning. Zegler had been outspoken, unfiltered, and often combative in interviews. But when the blow finally landed, there was no press tour left to defend, no platform to explain, just a trail of viral moments that hadn't aged well, and a wave of fan backlash that finally tipped over into industry rejection. The cancellation wasn't just about numbers, it was about optics, about public perception, and about accountability. And Rachel, who once claimed audiences would line up to see her, now stood alone in a theater with no film to promote, no studio backing her, and no plan for what comes next. The internet didn't hesitate. The moment Millie Bobby Brown's interview clip surfaced, the comment sections weren't just buzzing, they were erupting. Everyone instantly knew who she meant, and no one was pulling punches. This wasn't subtle fandom rivalry anymore. It was a full-blown cultural verdict. You watched side-by-side TikToks roll in like waves. One screen showed Millie answering calmly, eyes focused, tone respectful. The other screen? Rachel Zegler smirking in old interviews, calling the original Snow White weird and brushing off criticism with smug indifference. The contrast was brutal, and it went mega viral. Suddenly, hashtags like #MillieSaidIt and #ZeglerBacklash started trending. Millie's words became sound bites. Her interviews became templates for how a lead should speak on behalf of a film. Meanwhile, Rachel's interviews were being dissected, re-edited, memed, and looped into punchlines. The internet picked its hero, and it wasn't the princess. You saw fans calling Millie the industry's moral compass, while saying Rachel had torched a legacy role before it even hit theaters. Some blamed Disney for giving her too much creative control. Others blamed her for not realizing the responsibility that comes with being the face of a franchise. But one thing was unanimous. Snow White didn't fail quietly. It failed publicly, loudly. And the internet had receipts. And where was Disney in all this? Still silent. No defense, no statement. No attempt to protect the star they once called a bold new face of the future. In the vacuum left by corporate silence, the public made up its mind. Millie's calm, pointed words weren't just a moment, they were a mirror. One that reflected exactly what fans felt had gone wrong with Snow White all along. You need to understand something. Millie Bobby Brown didn't just grow up in the spotlight, she survived it. While other young stars fell into scandals or burnout, Millie played the long game. She took hits, learned from the scrutiny, grew from it. And when she finally spoke on the Snow White situation, she did it in the way only someone who's truly learned the business could. It wasn't a rant, it wasn't bitter, it wasn't a gotcha moment. It was poised, professional, surgical. When you lead a project, she said, you're also responsible for how you represent it and your audience. That line hit like a lightning bolt because it came from someone who's been there, who knows what it's like to be young, famous, and expected to carry a franchise. She knew the weight of it. And she also knew how easily one moment, one comment, can define or destroy your public image. For Rachel Zegler, that line felt like a mirror shattering. It called into question every defensive interview, every moment she dismissed fan concern, every time she made it seem like the story she inherited wasn't worth honoring. Because while Rachel was brushing off criticism, Millie was listening and preparing to speak when it mattered most. Fans connected with Millie's message because it didn't feel like shade, it felt like leadership. A quiet reminder that fame isn't just about starring roles or red carpets. It's about understanding the weight that comes with them. And when you disrespect the legacy, the fans, or the heart of a beloved story, the world will notice, and it won't always be kind. Millie didn't have to name names, she didn't have to get loud, she just had to tell the truth and let the industry and the internet do the rest. This wasn't just about a feud anymore, it had become something bigger, something heavier. Because once Millie Bobby Brown stepped into the conversation, it didn't just change the public's view of Rachel Zegler, it shifted the way Hollywood saw her too. Behind closed doors, the whispers started. Was Zegler too volatile? Too reactive? Too quick to push back against fan feedback rather than embracing it? Producers and casting directors, the same people who once saw her as Disney's next golden star, were now second-guessing. Not because of her talent, that was never in question, but because of her perception. Because in today's climate, especially with billion-dollar IPs on the line, image is everything. And Millie, she represented the exact opposite. Polished, patient, media-trained without sounding robotic. Someone who knew when to speak and when to let silence say more. In one understated comment, she had cemented herself not just as a fan favorite, but as a studio favorite, a reliable face for any project with a legacy to protect. Meanwhile, Rachel was left in damage control mode. She posted vague, cryptic Instagram stories about navigating tough lessons and protecting her peace. But it wasn't enough. The narrative had already taken off without her. And worse, her silence, once seen as mysterious or bold, now came across as a refusal to take accountability. The industry had begun choosing sides, and as projects get pitched and casts get assembled, Zegler's name might not be the first to come up anymore. Not because of her skill, but because of the risk. In contrast, Millie's voice now carried more weight than ever. She hadn't yelled, she hadn't insulted, she just said what everyone had been too afraid to say, and that, in Hollywood, is what earns you trust and longevity. It was supposed to be a fairy tale, a young, diverse actress taking on one of the most iconic roles in cinematic history. Disney's Snow White was positioned as a cultural reset, a fresh chapter in the studio's long-running success with live-action remakes. And for Rachel Zegler, this was meant to be her crowning moment, her Cinderella moment, her Emma Watson in Beauty and the Beast trajectory. Instead, it became a cautionary tale, a tale about what happens when studios misread the room, when they underestimate the importance of fan loyalty, when they mistake confidence for character leadership, and when the face of a film doesn't realize the story they're telling is bigger than them. Zegler didn't just lose a role, she lost the story. She lost control of the narrative. The same fans who once celebrated her casting ended up criticizing her detachment from the source material. And the actress who had once declared that people would line up to see whatever she did was suddenly left with no line and no movie. And then came Millie. Her words didn't cancel Snow White, but they crystallized everything that had gone wrong. Her subtle critique became the final frame in a reel of missed opportunities. It validated the growing frustration and transformed it into a wake-up call for an entire industry. Now, the legacy of the Snow White isn't one of reinvention, it's one of reflection. Reflection on ego, tone, responsibility, and the art of adaptation. Because when the audience you're trying to impress turns on you, and your peers begin to speak out, it's not just a flop, it's a reckoning. And in that reckoning, one truth remains. If you forget who the story is for, you risk losing the entire plot. You'd think landing the role of Snow White in a Disney live-action remake would be every actress's dream, a crowning achievement that cements you in the Hollywood elite. But for Rachel Zegler, it's turned into something closer to a nightmare. From the very beginning, this project has been buried under backlash, with criticism not only about the film's radical departure from the original story, but also about Zegler's polarizing comments during promotion. The once rising starlet has been accused of dismissing fans, pushing a message-heavy version of a beloved fairy tale, and acting as if the film was untouchable, all while it slipped further down in audience favor. Now, enter Jack Black. Known for his comedic charm, high-energy performances, and genuine love for cinema, Jack Black is the last person you'd expect to be at the center of an explosive behind-the-scenes confrontation. But according to persistent industry whispers, Black couldn't stay silent after seeing the mess unfold around Snow White. Rumor has it he approached Zegler during a promotional or private setting, directly addressing the elephant in the room, the backlash. Whether it was out of concern or frustration, insiders claim that Jack bluntly asked Zegler why she continued to brush off valid criticism and fan concerns, triggering a full-blown emotional meltdown. The moment didn't just shake Zegler, it sent ripples through the cast, crew, and even Disney's PR team. Suddenly, the internal tension became as visible as the public controversy. A supposed fairy tale had turned into a behind-the-scenes psychological drama, and Rachel Zegler was at the center of it all, fragile, frustrated, and feeling the walls close in. You're watching someone try to hold it together while the world crumbles around them. That's what it felt like as Rachel Zegler posted those now infamous photos of herself sitting completely alone in an empty movie theater. She wasn't just promoting her movie, she was pleading with the public. In her mind, maybe it was resilience, maybe it was loyalty to the film, but to everyone else, it was pure cringe. A metaphor playing out in real time. The lead actress sitting solo for a film that nobody asked for, in a theater nobody showed up to. These weren't isolated posts either. She kept doing it, again and again, like she was trying to manifest support by pretending it existed. But that backfired, hard. People took screenshots, made memes, said things like, "She's lost touch," or "This is just sad now." And it was. Now add Jack Black to the mix. When someone like Jack, who's beloved for his authenticity, humor, and genuine respect for film fans, steps in and allegedly confronts you about your attitude, it hits different. Sources say he wasn't yelling, he wasn't cruel, but he was honest. He allegedly asked Zegler why she kept dismissing legitimate fan feedback, why she acted like anyone who didn't love the film was simply a troll or a hater. You're already under pressure. You've seen the hate. You're trying to pretend it's fine. And now someone you respect, maybe even admire, is standing in front of you, echoing the same things you've spent months denying. According to reports, Zegler cracked. The confrontation reportedly triggered an emotional spiral. She walked off, visibly shaken. The meltdown wasn't just about one conversation, it was months of pressure exploding all at once, and the cameras weren't even rolling. From the outside, the film looked troubled, but behind the scenes, it was a disaster barely holding together with duct tape and denial. Insiders say Snow White's production was plagued by constant changes, reshoots, script rewrites, and last-minute cuts that left the entire crew feeling like they were building a plane mid-flight. It all started with the tone. Early test audiences were confused. The movie opened like a charming fairy tale, dreamy, nostalgic, full of potential. But as it progressed, it took a sharp left turn. Themes of independence and empowerment were layered so heavily into the script that they felt forced. Viewers didn't feel inspired. They felt lectured. The whimsical magic that defined Disney's classics, it got buried under monologues and messaging. Producers panicked. Scenes were recut, some scrapped entirely, and editors were reportedly working around the clock just to make it coherent. But the damage was already done. The pacing was uneven. The emotional arcs didn't land. And worst of all, the story no longer flowed. It stumbled. Jack Black, while not directly involved in production, had reportedly seen the rough cuts or heard enough from industry friends to form an opinion. When he allegedly confronted Zegler, it wasn't just about her attitude in interviews. It was about the film's very identity. How could she act like everything was fine when the final product was falling apart? Zegler, already aware of the chaos, was reportedly trying to keep a brave face. But hearing it from Black, someone fans actually trust, might have broken that mask. She wasn't just defending a film anymore. She was defending a mess she couldn't fix, from a seat she never expected to sit in alone. And in Hollywood, nothing exposes weakness faster than silence behind the curtain. You've seen how fast the internet can turn on someone. And when Rachel Zegler's alleged breakdown hit the rumor mill, it was like blood in the water. Within hours, the story was everywhere. You couldn't scroll through TikTok or X without seeing a screenshot, a meme, or a sarcastic take on the situation. Some posts mocked her crying. Others clipped together her old interview soundbites, where she said fans would line up to see whatever she does, and played them over footage of empty theaters. The narrative had flipped. She wasn't the rising star anymore. She was the punchline. But this wasn't just personal. It became symbolic. Fans, critics, and even casual moviegoers used her alleged meltdown as the perfect representation of what they saw as Disney's collapse. Zegler wasn't just one actress under pressure. She became the face of a larger frustration, the idea that legacy stories were being tampered with by people who didn't seem to understand or respect what made them special. And the worst part? Disney stayed silent. There was no official denial, no supportive message, no damage control that felt remotely authentic. Just the usual PR spin, "We're proud of our cast," or "This reimagining brings Snow White to a new generation." But the internet wasn't having it. The silence made everything seem more real, more raw. You saw people start digging deeper into production leaks, cast interviews, editing rumors, trying to piece together the real story. And with every thread pulled, the chaos underneath became more obvious. The alleged meltdown didn't just trend, though. It validated people's skepticism. It was proof, in their eyes, that something was fundamentally broken in Disney's approach. And Rachel Zegler, she was no longer just the star of the movie. She was the symbol of its unraveling. It's one thing to have your film flop. It's another thing entirely to be outperformed by a pixelated kids movie based on a video game. That's exactly what happened. While Snow White was struggling to scrape together box office returns, the Minecraft movie came out of nowhere and crushed expectations, pulling in a massive $300 million globally in its opening weekend. Audiences weren't just showing up for nostalgia or fun. They were sending a message. Minecraft didn't try to preach. It didn't try to rewire a classic. It just delivered what it promised. Silly fun, creative visuals, and entertainment for the whole family. No hidden agenda, no overwriting of a beloved tale, just escapism, which is exactly what Snow White forgot it was supposed to be. The comparison was brutal. TikToks and YouTube shorts flooded in showing split screens. Zegler alone in a theater versus Minecraft fans lined up outside packed showings. One side was pure joy, the other was secondhand embarrassment. Viewers laughed, commented things like, "This is what happens when you forget the magic," or "One respected its audience, one lectured them." And it hit even harder when critics praised Minecraft for doing what Snow White couldn't, being fun. Suddenly, Rachel Zegler's emotional unraveling, the reshoots, the tonal confusion, all of it felt avoidable. All of it felt earned. To you, it was clear. Snow White wasn't just failing, it was being humiliated. And Jack Black, he was in the Minecraft cast. That irony didn't go unnoticed either. The man who allegedly confronted Zegler over her dismissiveness was now part of the very project that showed Disney how storytelling should be done, without ego, without forced messaging, and without forgetting who your audience is. That's not just a loss, that's a masterclass in contrast. At this point, you're probably asking the same question everyone else is. Did it even happen? Did Rachel Zegler actually break down in front of Jack Black? Or is this just another internet myth that got way out of hand? That's the thing. No one really knows. There's no footage, no statement, no denial. Not from Zegler, not from Jack, not from Disney, just silence. And in today's digital culture, silence isn't neutral, it's suspicious. The fact that no one has addressed the situation directly has only poured gasoline on the fire. If it didn't happen, why not squash it immediately? And if it did, why is everyone pretending it didn't? But in the court of public opinion, truth often takes a back seat to believability, and the alleged meltdown fits the narrative way too well. An actress seen as arrogant by critics, a veteran comedic actor with credibility stepping in, a massive box office flop in the background. It feels true, and that's enough to make it go viral. You start seeing fan edits online with dramatic music, showing Zegler walking alone in a hallway backstage, even though it's from a completely different event. But it doesn't matter. People want it to be real, because it gives them something to point to, something that explains the chaos, something that makes the failure feel more human, more cinematic, almost poetic. Even if the story was exaggerated, you realize it's now become more than just a rumor. It's symbolic, a perfect metaphor for the film's collapse. The emotional weight, the creative tension, the public backlash, all of it bottled into one whispered moment between two stars. Whether the meltdown was real or not, the damage is done, and the legend is already more powerful than the truth could ever be. You've seen Disney pull off miracles before. The Jungle Book, Beauty and the Beast, even Aladdin, they weren't perfect, but they struck a balance. They honored the past while updating the present. They respected the source material. But Snow White? This one missed the mark so badly that people aren't just criticizing the movie, they're rethinking their trust in Disney altogether. What makes it worse is how preventable it all felt. Fans weren't mad about diversity. They weren't even mad about changes. They were mad about tone deafness, about the studio acting like the audience didn't matter, about a story that once sparked wonder being turned into a lecture wrapped in CGI. It wasn't inclusive, it was insulting. And now, Rachel Zegler's meltdown, whether fact or fiction, has become a permanent fixture in this cautionary tale. If it truly happened, it's the human cost of a studio putting a 22-year-old in the crosshairs of a cultural clash. If it didn't, it's still the public's way of expressing just how bad things got. That the only way to make sense of the mess was to believe someone finally cracked under the pressure. You've seen this before. When creators ignore criticism, dismiss fans, and believe their brand can carry anything across the finish line. As the internet burned with debates, edits, and memes dissecting every frame of the leaked scene, Rachel Zegler found herself fighting a war without an army. The most deafening part of the entire ordeal? Disney's complete silence. No press release, no clarification, no tweet. While their lead actress endured a fresh wave of criticism, much of it vicious, personal, and politically charged, the studio seemed to vanish from the battlefield. Behind closed doors, insiders described the atmosphere as chaotic damage control. One source familiar with internal discussions said Disney execs were split. Half wanted to issue a statement confirming the scene was misinterpreted or unfinished VFX, while others feared doing so would only legitimize the outrage. Meanwhile, marketing teams debated whether to lean into the controversy for buzz or distance themselves completely. But for Rachel, there was no debate. She was taking the heat alone. And it wasn't just internet trolls anymore. Late-night hosts, podcast personalities, and even major news outlets began discussing the downfall of Snow White. And Zegler's name was always front and center. The narrative was no longer about the movie. It was about her politics, her past comments, her persona. To many, she wasn't just playing Snow White. She was the controversy. Even some within the studio reportedly began whispering doubts. One anonymous crew member told a blogger, "This whole thing got out of hand, but Rachel didn't make it easier. She leaned into it early on. Now, we're paying for it." Others were more sympathetic, describing her as someone who genuinely believed she was helping redefine a classic for the better, but lacked the institutional support when the tide turned. And it did turn. Public sentiment flipped. Fans who once praised her boldness now questioned her judgment. Articles with headlines like, "Rachel Zegler's activism backfires" began surfacing, and all the while, Gal Gadot, her co-star, remained unscathed, appearing calm, poised, and almost eerily detached during press stops. One viral side-by-side video showed Gal smiling through an interview, while Rachel visibly fought back emotion in another, with the caption, "One of them knows how to play the game." By the end of the week, it was obvious. Disney wasn't going to save her, and Gal Gadot wasn't going to speak for her. Rachel Zegler was the scapegoat, like it or not, and the world was watching to see how she would respond next. You probably weren't expecting Snow White to trend again. but not like this. Just days before its second weekend in theaters, AMC Theaters allegedly leaked a scene from Disney's Snow White remake, and the internet imploded. The clip, which appears to show a subtle romantic exchange between Snow White and another female character, went viral within hours. Viewers flooded social media, shocked and divided, with hashtags like #WokeWhite and #SnowGay climbing the trending lists by the hour. For Rachel Zegler, who was already dealing with brutal backlash from the film's disappointing $72 million opening, this was gasoline on an already raging fire. Insiders say she was blindsided. Sources close to the situation describe her as visibly shaken when news of the leak broke, not just because of the content, but the timing and the way it was being weaponized against her. She had just begun making peace with the film's poor box office showing, when the internet began painting her as the face of Disney's woke agenda all over again. The leak reignited culture war debates, this time louder and more chaotic. Conservative outlets jumped on it, claiming Disney had gone too far, while progressive voices defended the inclusion, saying